Let's get to Dr. Nabeel Khoury, who is an expert in the Middle East. He's one of my counterparts all the time on the Al Jazeera Network. Dr. Nabeel, great to have you with us, sir.
Good morning, John.
Always good to have you. Let's get to the Khashoggi situation. The Saudis, Doctor, yesterday coming out with, I guess, their 5th, 6th, 7th, 8th, 10th version of what happens. It's like they give you another version of the truth by installment every time the Turkish government and President Erdogan leaks a new piece of information. They change their story or manipulate it in order to coincide with the new piece of information. Have you ever seen a cover-up that is more ridiculous right now than what the Saudis have done, sir?
Well, the whole operation was ridiculous, was botched, was as stupid as it was vile. And now the cover-up is the same thing. The sad thing is that many people in Saudi Arabia buy this because they have blind support for the royal family and for Mohammed bin Salman, MBS, the Crown Prince. And unfortunately, he seems to be getting some international support. There seems to be a bit of a conspiracy to try to give him a buy on this one. So I don't expect to see him pay the price for this murder anytime soon.
Dr. Khoury, when you say don't pay the price, the Treasury Department of the U.S. government yesterday sanctioning 17 of the individuals that the Saudi government themselves said were involved in this horrific murder of Jamal Khashoggi. But then let me ask you this. The president said there would be severe consequences if he was convinced that MBS was a part of this. Is there anybody that follows this conceivably that can envision a situation where Mohammed bin Salman was not directly involved, either directing it or ordering it or aware of it, when they sent 17 people there, right? They came with chainsaws that could cut through a bone. They came with a vat of hydraulic acid to dissolve a body. They came with somebody that was supposed to be a lookalike to Khashoggi. They forgot that his feet were too big, so he couldn't put his shoes on. Then they're claiming yesterday that they gave the body to a local contractor, what was remaining of the body, after they dissolved it in the acid. But they're saying they don't know who this contractor was. Like, they have no phone number, they have no name. I mean, did they just go down the street in Istanbul and wave somebody riding a bike and offer him $1,000 to hide the body? I mean, and then say thanks and have no record of him? I mean, how can anybody in their right mind believe any of this?
I don't
Dr.
think
Khoury.
any independent analyst believes this. Any Saudi expert believes this. It is clearly a made-up story, clearly a cover-up, and it stinks. I mean, the thing is, this is a dictator, a very wealthy one, who has a lot of Western powers dangling from a chain, and he yanks that chain anytime he needs it. I do think that the story has had some consequences for Saudi Arabia and has put him somewhat on hold. He does seem to be a bit restrained right now, perhaps by his father, at least until the dust settles. And they expect that at some point people will stop asking questions. He chose the 17 as scapegoats. Now, some of them are already in jail, but I expect with a wink and a nod, you stay here for a few months, and when that tension goes away, we'll let you out again, that sort of thing.
So the Saudi prosecutors, and obviously they've changed their story as facts come out in order to meet the new facts, which is insane in and of itself. So the Saudi prosecutors say, okay, there's 5 of these people that I'm going to request the death penalty for. So let me ask you this. If you're one of these 5 people that you went there on orders from the government and you carried out the orders, and now you're going to be executed? Like, tell me how that works.
Well, I mean, this is Saudi Arabia, and I'm sure some of these people are so intensely loyal that they would give their heads to that. They probably literally said something like this to the prince. I mean, there is an Arab saying about giving your head or putting your head in the hands of someone that you are so intensely loyal to. So I'm sure some of them wouldn't mind dying so that he gets spared the blame for this murder. As for some of them who would prefer to go on living, probably they are too afraid to voice any objection to this. And I suppose those are the ones who are currently being restricted, being put away somewhere. So one way or the other, this guy gets away with murder. I think where the only thing that may happen is that eventually there may be a family rebellion against him. His cousins, fellow princes, people who were not happy to see him become crown prince and do not wish to see him ascend to the throne, may at some point form a family gathering and say this guy is unacceptable, the way he came to power and what he's doing to Saudi Arabia. He's following very, very aggressive policies in the region. This is not the Khashoggi murder is just one foolish act. But the practical decimation of half the Yemeni population is a much more grave one.
Does MBS stay in power in your judgment, Dr. Khoury?
He stays in power for now. If you see the dance going on between him, between the Trump administration, and between Erdogan, the president of Turkey, clearly Turkey has the goods on MBS, and the CIA chief has seen it. Probably Pompeo himself, although he denies it,
right,
has heard the tape.
Yes, sir.
So Turkey clearly wants something out of this. That's the reason they've been releasing things in drips and drabs. Erdogan is a rival to Saudi Arabia and wants MBS to back off some of his policies in the region. Turkey also wants the cleric who is in Pennsylvania, Fethullah Gul. They asked for his extradition
right
during the Obama presidency, and that was refused primarily because there's no evidence against him that would legally allow the U.S. to hand him over. But Turkey wants that as a prize for them sitting on the actual tape, sitting on the on releasing all the information that they have. The Trump administration would like to give the prince a buy. I mean, they want some token punishment, and this is what this putting these 17 on a list is a token thing to say, here, you know, the perpetrators have been punished. But clearly, this is being done to salvage the arms sales from the U.S. to Saudi Arabia. That's what's key here.
Well, the president, while he said he's not made his mind up on what he's going to do because he wants to wait for all the facts to come in, and of course they come in and the Saudis change their story, the president has already said it is one of the most botched cover-ups he's ever seen, and it's a Keystone Cops Brigade. But the president said from the beginning that this was not going to stand in the way of the transaction of the $110 billion memorandum of understanding arms sales, because President Trump said, look, this is a business transaction, and regardless of what we do, the Saudis are simply going to buy it from China or Russia. But I think then there's the transaction Doctor, and then there's policy, which I want to get into here. We're with Dr. Nabeel Khoury. He is an expert in the Middle East. He's also he's a senior fellow at the Atlantic Council, and he's often a panelist friend of mine on the Al Jazeera Arabic Network out of Washington, D.C. That's where our office is. So, Dr. Khoury, the first thing that we may get if Mohammed bin Salman stays in power is a policy change in the administration's position in supporting the Saudi Emirates coalition in the Yemeni civil war. Do you see this driving a U.S. change in policy there?
Yeah, I see that Congress, which has put forth resolutions, one from the House, one from the Senate, before this midterm election, trying to get the U.S. to stop supporting this war and to use diplomacy instead to try to end the strife in Yemen. Those resolutions failed, but just barely, before the election. I imagine right now, with increasingly high-pitched voices from some Republicans joining now majority Democrats in the House, I expect a War Powers Act relating to Yemen to pass in January, once the new session of Congress begins. Such a resolution could force the hand of the administration to either get this war stopped or to use the ultimate weapon, which is withhold logistical assistance, which the U.S. has been providing Saudi Arabia, and withhold military sales until the war stops. So I do expect a change. Unfortunately, it's been too slow coming. Mm-hmm. But I think eventually the right thing has to be done here.
Doctor, when you look at this, if you're King Salman, and I know MBS is his son, but if you look at this, I mean, the best way out, the cleanest way out is simply to have a reshuffling of the power structure and basically put someone else in charge and make MBS step aside, right? I mean, then he could be the scapegoat. Yeah. That could, everything could then go back to the way it was, and he could take the blame for it, as he probably should anyway. Why won't they just, one chess move for the Saudis solves all of it. Why won't they just do that, as you had suggested earlier?
Well, there is very little, if any, transparency in the way decisions are made in Saudi Arabia, especially inside the royal family. And believe it or not, U.S. intelligence does not get inside that family very much. So there's really not much we know about what's going on. But the speculation is that the king is either in dementia already or approaching dementia. His health is failing. He loves his sons, and he would like his line to continue in power in Saudi Arabia. He has an even younger son than MBS, who has been in the U.S. as Saudi ambassador. He's been recalled, and I imagine he's in waiting, pending what happens to MBS. So there is a lot of personal incentive here by a monarch to keep his children in power after him. He hasn't shown much influence himself since he came to that office. MBS, his son, has been running the show. So if he were to be logical, yes, he would replace the son, admit that he put the wrong guy as crown prince, and reshuffle and start a serious transition to a new, more responsible generation of rulers in Saudi Arabia. But I don't live in a fantasy world, mm-hmm. but this does make a nice fantasy. I don't think we'll see it happen.
But you're saying that the Saudi kingdom did recall the U.S. ambassador, who's his younger son. The Saudi ambassador. Right,
Washington.
The Saudi ambassador representing Saudi in the United States called him back to Riyadh, right?
Right, yeah.
And he's MBS's younger brother.
Right.
So, and this is a very critical time in U.S.-Saudi relations. So you would have to ask yourself, if you wanted to play this out, Agatha Christie style, you'd say, well, this is interesting. And he goes back to Riyadh at a time where they really need him in the U.S. Maybe there is something going on behind the scenes, or maybe it's a stopgap. Well,
yeah, I mean, if Shakespeare were alive today, he would write a doozy of a tragic comedy on this story.
Horrible.
A tale of murder, yeah.
Dr. Khoury, we're out of time. I want to thank Dr. Nabeel Khoury for being with us. He's Senior Fellow at the Atlantic Council, and he's also a panelist on the Al Jazeera Arabic Network with me many times. Dr. Khoury, thanks for being with us, sir.